So thank you all joining this wonderful session together with us, Julia Jansen and also Luciana Hodgson. So actually it's our pleasure to go with you through how to build a modern high-performing finance team. This session will cover at least 5 topics we would like to do.
Great.
So it's an introduction. It's what a modern high-performing finance team will do. How do you see the environment as influencing what is needed? The 4th, how do you decide the right order to build your team? And 5th, what hiring strategies have you found useful? And of course, additionally, we will invite you to a Q&A session. And I'm now handing over to Julie, which just joined. And maybe you can also cover the topic as a main description, what we would like to do in this session.
Hi, yes, so apologies for being a couple of minutes late and I'm missing the intro. So my name is Julie. I'm the finance director at WeGift, a London-based startup. So I've been here for about 18 months now. My background's mostly around financial services, but more in the tech space over the last few years. We've got a great panel of speakers here with us. So we're going to be exploring how to build a modern, high-performing finance team. And there's a great range of experiences between startup and corporate and consulting. So feel free to ask questions along the way in the Q&A chat session, and yeah, let's get started. Cool. Does everyone want to introduce themselves? I'll hand over to Julia, Luciana, and then circle back to Theresa.
Great, thanks. So I get to start and try to stay within a short period of time. I think I'll make it very brief, and then we can elaborate in the examples on where that background plays a role. I think my background is mostly Big 4 corporates and scale-up startups and company building. So currently I'm at Comtravo and building and extending the finance team here. We are a platform for business travel and for small, medium-sized enterprises. And we are going big with international expansion and buy and build strategy. And before that, I spent a couple of years at a company builder here in Berlin. It's called Ionic. So I was responsible for the centralized finance function for a portfolio of 33 entities in different areas. So I provided those services. I scaled up a team up to 16 people. And given that company building has changed dramatically, I also had to downsize and decrease the team to about 1/3 of the size. So that was restructuring efforts there. And before that, I was with BMW Group in different stages of treasury and controlling and finance function across the world in China and Singapore. Before that, I was born and raised, let's say, in my finance background at the Big 4 here in Berlin, where I also studied. So I did my fair share of PowerPoint there. So yeah, that's pretty much about me. So I'll head over to Luciana and we'll dig deeper in the experiences where relevant later.
Thank you, Julia. My experience is actually quite similar. I also started Big 4, Deloitte for 5 years, and then I moved to a couple of big corporations, Reckitt Benckiser, Fiat, in many different roles. I moved to the startup environment in 2015 and has never left since. I absolutely love it. My experience, unfortunately, I have had experience in downsizing as well. It's never a good exercise, but my experience is mostly about building teams and, in fact, finance departments from scratch. So I usually join tech companies once they realize they have a need for an in-house finance department. I'm usually the first person there. So I hire the team, implement the systems, implement the processes, and etc. And then I move on to the next one. I've worked not as many countries as Julia, but I started my career in Brazil. I'm working in the UK now, but also I have done a couple of international expansions myself, which is quite an interesting project to do. So that's it about me. I'll hand over to Theresa now.
Thank you so much, Luciana. Yes, and quite a story there too. I always like to hear about those. So from my perspective, it's, my name is Theresa König. I just joined the team Finance Transformation at PwC in December. Professionally, before I specialized also in group and corporate finance. We're driving up value, of course, over the organizations within the teams and processes excite me still the most. I'm still doing the same, just in a different role now. So before that, I started my career path 10 years ago. Also at a Big Four in advisory and audit, in financial services, for example, in Frankfurt, and then also moved to Berlin. So I stayed in Germany actually. Moved on, then made a big jump into the startup scene, and started my finance position there, with also building up, same as Luciana, building up a finance team within the incubator structure. And also the team, 7 people, also kind of first one there, and then yeah, finance was mostly external, and then of course in-housing, building up the team, and yeah, letting it grow. Moved on then in several other finance positions, director finance, and also as CFO within Watchmaster, early stage hyper growth. Started 20 people, moved up to 100 people. Finance team, of course, recruiting, building it up, also skills, etc. for the expansion, and then also had some positions within later stages and restructuring and post-merger companies, which is also quite an experience. And yes, I'm very much excited to have here a great conversation in how we maybe define also modern high-performing teams, and how is it together? What's your experience? So I'm very happy and pleased to join here in this call.
So, yeah, sounds like an amazing breadth of experience across everybody. I feel like the odd one out. I've not worked at a Big Four actually. So my background, actually, I started at a bank back in Australia, then worked at a small sort of like 100 to 200 people fintech in San Francisco, went through the exit there. So also we were the company getting acquired, so have been on that side of the acquisition and integrations and things like that, and been in London just over 4 years now, specifically in the fintech space. So working on scale ups, and yeah, not looked back to corporate yet either. Okay. So as we get started, obviously we want to first kind of explore, in today's world, what do we all think a modern high-performing finance team is? So would love to hear everyone's definitions, and what are the skills or the mindsets and attitudes that you believe are important here. Luciana, why don't we start with you?
For me, a modern team is a team that works together with the business and brings insights about the business. So I think before we were seen, especially as accountants, we were seen as someone technical that did the bookkeeping and that's it. All we cared about was accounting and tax and etc. If that's the mentality, you will not be successful anymore. I think you need to partner with the business, and you need to understand about marketing, and you need to understand about sales, and you need to understand about the manufacturing, if that's the case. If you don't work closely with the business, you will become redundant. You will become irrelevant, because without that partnership, you won't be able to bring meaningful insights. So what I think is a high-performing finance team is a team that can work together with the business in terms of, for example, questioning things like, are we at the right price point? Are we costing correctly? Are we making a profit? Some of these questions, as basic as they may seem, for a startup scale up, they are not being asked by anyone. And that can trigger so many changes in the business about the way they go about selling, about the choices of suppliers and things like that. So I think we are an instigator. Finance as an instigator is a very good description. I think I like that. So that's how I see the team working now.
Makes complete sense. Yes, Julia, just in your breadth of experiences, is there anything different there?
I think Luciana touched a lot on the topics that are very relevant. I think for me, modern is a mixture of course, what you can influence as the finance leader who builds that team, but also of the organization. So I think what was always very important to me, what I've experienced, is that you have finance can be perceived as a strong back office function, right? Of just, let's see, working on receipts and just producing account statements and that's it. And I think that shift is, especially in an environment of scale-ups or startups, finance becomes a more important role and is more moving towards a front office role, and that's where it should be. So if products are brought to the market or services, then finance needs to be consulted beforehand, before it reaches the market. And for that, of course, you need the skill set in your finance team as well in order to accommodate that and to be the advisor in-house and to be this, let's say, front office function. So you need that skill set to accompany that front office function that finance needs to take in order to make companies successful in, let's say, a scale-up environment. I think for a corporate or consulting environment, the finance function can be a bit different. So, and I've seen different versions of it, especially at BMW or also PwC. But I think the one that I'm talking about, the scale-up and startup, is moving the team to have the skill set and capabilities and also the knowledge to be a valuable front office function of the company that you work in.
Yeah, so very interesting, like both touching on the switch from kind of a traditional back office to that more front office and business focused. Yeah, Theresa, your thoughts?
Yes, my thoughts to it, and of course, I would say from my experience, actually, I would say also key factors, just in addition to very well said, of course, working together successfully, being successful, meaning understand and working closely with the business cross-functional. It was always, finance gets the sales numbers, gets logistics or anything else, marketing. So yes, of course, seeing this in these figures in the P&L, in the balance sheet, in cash flow, and additional analytics, and taking it also to predictive analytics and supporting there also with business decision, as Julia said, correct, moving it finance to a business partner. One effort, of course, we did in incubator. We both know together. It was one big effort we did together on making it also seen at this, that we can help supporting in setting new businesses, setting new streams. Also within Watchmaster, having an expansion was very important to understand also where are you? What's the next sales? What's the next country? How can we help in terms of knowledge in tax, right? Very important topic, knowledge in how do we go with payment providers? How is the customer in that field or in that business model? So very important altogether. So I would say basically on two key factors. What's the ground values of the leadership of finance, but also overall in the company? What's the code of conduct you want to work together? And are they role models? So really creating this environment of being modern, being high performing. And also how far are they already building in a trustful and safe environment for the people, so they feel respected, understood, and heard, cross-functional. So actually people start to engage and involve to really build this together. So I think this is normally one basic function you can see. Going a little deeper, I would say it's about really building diverse teams, also in finance, not just in sales, not just marketing, but really accountant maybe thinks different than a controller, than investor relations, legal, or BI. So really understanding each other's strength and then enabling them to really build on those, to appreciate those, and to see those differences as chance and as value add. I think this is one of the most important things we want to see in modern high performance.
100% agree. I think it seems like we're all in the same theme of what those new skill sets look like. I think one thing I wanted to add was as we were making this transition from a back office to front office commercial function, one thing I've been noticing just speaking to other finance people is just be aware that maybe not everyone in your company has caught up to that fact, the new fact of life. So just being aware, like there are potentially going to be people that do see you as a back office function, or, please approve my expenses, or, why isn't my supplier paid? So I think that self-awareness as well, right? Like be aware of like who sees you in what way versus how you want to be seen and what role you want to play, and then just being really explicit about that hopefully can help make that transition from back office to front office be more explicit and have people welcome that new definition. The other component I wanted to add, just from the technical skill set, is I'm seeing a lot more finance people developing sort of techie skills, right? So as you get into more business intelligence and data, picking up things like SQL or Python, even if we talk about automation and finance ops type stuff, using integrations and more apps like Zapier or something to connect to different applications and automate your roles rather than relying on good old Excel spreadsheets. I think seeing a lot more of these kind of tools and tricks that people are playing with, which I'm not sure, 30, 40 years that we would have, or probably not because they didn't exist then. But yeah, that's super interesting. And I feel like potentially there's some influence as well, depending on where you work. But before we get into that question, I just wanted to let everybody know we've got a poll going. I think you should have panels on the right-hand side of your screen. So we just wanted to ask everybody, what work environment are you in? And just give us a bit more background into the audience that we have today.
I like how it's running up now. Everybody's participating and we see a clear majority in the startup scale-up space, right?
Wow, we have over 121 votes here. That's amazing, 124. Julie, you're going to summarize.
Thank you, everybody.
Right?
Yeah, so it looks
amazing.
like there's a clear winner.
Great. We're talking to people that work in pretty much the same environment that we do. So hopefully this discussion will be meaningful to them.
Yeah.
Yes, and we can probably focus on a lot of the startup scale-up experiences and not make anybody big left out if the corporate world with its own subsets of finance is not tackled as much.
I would just to add, they're also learning and adapting, of course, from startup and scale-up. Yeah, it's always a little pioneer position startups and scale-ups have, and collaborating together, and also within PwC we saw it. It's called Next Level as initiative, and we're bringing also together with the former head of here the German startup. How do you say fine? I don't remember. Collaboration association. Thank you, with Florian Earl. He brings it also together, and also in finance transformation. Of course, we have the corporate experience, and also I think it's a wonderful evolving together and growing together approach. Yeah. So,
I guess what I'm saying is, in a scale-up startup, you build from scratch, or you build to create more departments and professionalize and specialize and build fallback and structures. And in a corporate, you usually have big structures and finance processes and teams already set up, and you just need to move them maybe more in what, let's say, we call modern, whatever that means. But I guess it's a different starting point. The starting point for startup scale-up is what we probably can discuss or elaborate more.
definitely.
Yeah.
So we have the votes, Julie.
Yes. I would say, Luciana, just because you've mentioned you've now had a few experiences, or you've been literally the first person on the ground, do you want to share what you see as, what's been influencing how you think about that starting up the finance team, and then we can transition around to the scale-ups and then back to the corporates.
Yeah, well, my experience has been the following. I'm usually the first person on the ground in the finance team, so I usually do encounter resistance, right? I'm still seen as the person who is going to not let anyone spend any money, who I'm going to be very much against any sort of expenses and etc. And it takes a while for them to understand that I'm not there to stop them from doing their work. I'm there to support them in doing their work. I am there to serve. I'm not, the business does not revolve around me in what I want and what I say is right. It's the other way around. The first thing I do when I join is I try to understand what is it that they're trying to accomplish, right? That's the most important thing in a scale up. Do you want to go public in 5 years? Do you want to sell your business? Do you want to grow? First thing is, where are we heading? And then the second thing is, okay, so what's stopping us from getting there? So at my current role at Infogrid, I spent at least 2 or 3 weeks just talking to, first of all, to top management, and then although cascading down to everyone to try to understand what is it that you're trying to accomplish. And then I understand what is it that's stopping you from accomplishing that, and then how I can help. Is it a process related? Is it a mentality related problem? So we are a catalyst to change, right? So after 2, 3, 4 weeks, I try to convince them that I'm there to support and to help. So my answer to things is not automatically no, like they think it is. Oh, I want to acquire this tool. I want to invest in this. My answer is not no. My answer is usually, okay, how can we make this work? Is it the right time? Is it the right tool? What is it that you're trying to achieve? So this is what I call partnering with the business. So I think the main takeaways here is that first, you need to understand what they're trying to achieve. Second, you need to understand what's stopping them from achieving that, and then tackle those issues.
Yeah, that all makes sense, right? So it's about that sort of openness and the balance, and hopefully that helps answers. I was just looking at one of the questions here, like from Ian, how do you balance enough process to safeguard the business of ensuring enough agility to actually grow and make decisions quickly? Yeah, well, I guess Theresa, just like you mentioned, working startups, but also kind of advising startups. Like, do you have any alternative perspectives on how we can do that?
Should I answer? Okay, let me just answer that one quickly.
Yeah, go ahead.
So one very important feature about technology companies, especially startups and scale-ups, is speed. There is no way you can take a lot of time to do anything. It doesn't work because you lose momentum, because they're still trying to establish a foothold in the market. If you miss your timing, you're doomed. You're basically done. So speed is very, very important. How do you balance that? So this is what I've done that has worked for me. When I have an idea or when I want to implement a project, I prototype it very quickly and I try to implement it very quickly to see if it works. And if I realize it doesn't work, I stop straight away and I change methods and I change approach. And that's how I've usually done it. You have to make mistakes fast, I guess.
But I would agree to prototype, but I also would prioritize who are your main stakeholders, right, that you're trying to please and which will have the biggest impact on you. So I guess tax authorities are pretty much the number one stakeholder. So I guess when it comes to setting up structures fast, those making, I think, tax authorities and potentially also maybe investors or other, let's say, authorities, take that into consideration on the priority list and take more time to make that diligent and accurate, and whatever else can be, let's say, cleaned up in a really high speed environment later in terms of your year-end closing, that can probably be prioritized downwards. But I mean, in my experiences in the incubator, we build structures from scratch, or try to. So when we build them startups that are tiny, that just have an idea, we still try to aim, of course, this is the benefit of a company builder, to build finance functions in a way that it doesn't matter if you write one invoice per day or 50,000, but sometimes that is, of course, the benefit if you have these big structures. But that is still a thought process that I would go in now if I change or continue building a more modern finance team. What is needed if I don't know, grow the size, let's say, times 100? And what's then the first thing to break? So prioritize in terms of importance and, let's say, speed. So what would cause the biggest pain, and then analyze those two. Could be
I would like to add for Luciana and Julia, because it's a great thing, right? It's one of the speed. I would say we have a wonderful question here from Clement. What are the first 3 profiles to hire to make a finance team successful? Just to understand the question, right? A profile in terms of role, job spec profile, that's one thing. I would say setting profile in terms of a little wider definition. What's the value or the core value, or what's the person like? Because I think in this environment, to really have the speed and to really do fast prototyping, etc., you need to be a very, very good learner, a very good listener, very, very fast adaptive. You need to be a little techie, right? I think this is in modern world now. You need to have fun with, exploring. So I would say, Clement, it's not always about what hard skills or technical skills they already learned. It's the ability, how fast, how adaptive they can learn. And if they have, of course, in the beginning, maybe a little analytical skills already, or controlling or accounting skills, most of them can also be taught. And if they're interested, they do themselves. If it's a lifelong learner profile, they do by themselves normally. And of course, in a startup environment, you need this team environment and also high communication skills, so they can really be proactive together with the team, because you need to go to sales and say, hey, what's going on there? Where's the contract? What about the new rates? Do you have new, I don't know, a new draft of a contract? Because you need this. So actually, it's normally very proactive, high agility, and really wanting to learn and wanting to understand together and working together, finding solutions.
And we've seen a few questions coming up around, how should you be explicit about these roles and how do you help make that transition? And I think through all this relationship building, I am in favor of just being really explicit and clear about what the roles are and defining them and I mean, it has to come down top down a little bit as well, right? Like you've got your CEO or the founders who will always be setting the tone. So if you do not agree with them what the role of finance is, then it will be very unlikely that it actually does roll out or through the organization. And again, I'm kind of tying in a little bit more of my experiences from the smaller companies or small to mid-size, but yeah, if the CEO comes in, they're always overriding the finance function in terms of the decisions or the advice, or you're just taking a different approach, then it's highly unlikely that finance will be able to kind of make that stance, right, as the decision maker or as a key business advisor, at least, if not the decision maker. So I think in terms of making that transition, you need the highest level of buy-in, and therefore have them also be explicit with the rest of the organization. Like in these situations, you have to have finance sign off or finance approval that this is a good business initiative, and that you work in concert with the CEO or whoever it might be, like the business head or the GM in that situation, that the two of you will agree the decisions together so that you're not kind of overridden as a finance function. I think, just in my personal experience, I find being explicit and clear actually helps because it sets the scene and the tone for everybody. Whereas if you are trying to do it implicitly without that clear direction from the more senior people, there is always a question mark, and other teams will always have that option of saying, I'm just going to go to the CEO or whoever it might be, like I'm just going to go to the GM on this and bypass finance.
Really, this should be in C-level very, very clear defined that the C-level decision is a C-level decision and they should align. Of course, if you take the most important things, right, it's an iteration. Also in the C-level, right? It's enable, it's involved, it's informing, it's aligning, it's always an iteration. And if you do this together and really mark finance, hey, yes, I bring business value. It's X, Y, Z. We can raise up margin. We can lower, X, Y, Z costs due to that because it will affect processes in terms of marketing, sales, etc. I think giving this finance perspective, because they are cross-functional normally thinkers, as I see it. If you, right, Luciana, you go in first. Julia, you also normally go in first. So actually I would say the mindset also to answer that question again, that's a profile, very diplomatic, because you need to understand all perspectives, CEOs, COOs, investors, banks, tax authority, all of them. So, and then making a win-win circle out of that. I think that's wonderful to do. And I think as a leader, we're here in CFO Connect Summit, as a finance leader, you're able to do so. I think that's the most important thing. You need to make yourself aware. Yes, you are able to do that.
Theresa, I think you make a very good point, and I would love to hear your opinion about this comment that Julie made, because I think it's very relevant when he says sometimes in some companies the finance function keeps being overridden by the CEO. And I think that's very symptomatic of the relationship between the CEO and the CFO or the finance person. If there's no trust there, the relationship is broken. I don't think it can work, really. It's not a problem to fix. I think this is a symptom of something much bigger problem, because if the CEO and the CFO do not trust each other, I don't think this relationship is going to work.
Maybe something that I just have a very funny example just out of life. We had this that finance for some reason had time to restructure our whatever we bought for the office costs. So we kind of crossed out the frozen strawberries that people use to make their drinks in the morning. So for whatever reason, that was crossed out, and that created a lot of unhappiness with the employees. So they ran to the CEO, and the CEO was like, sure, I don't mind, I mean, if you want frozen strawberries, right? And then they went back to finance and said, yeah, but the CEO said we can have frozen strawberries. And I think it just needed some clarification and telling the CEO, by the way, this is causing the issue because we were just overwritten. This was a decision of finance and you were just overwritten, and now we have to have frozen strawberries, which make absolute no sense whatsoever, because we have fresh fruits as well. And you had literally, it took away time of the CEO, of the CFO, and of employees to talk about frozen strawberries because of like a symptomatic tiny broken thing, which should be clear if finance says this is. Talk to finance if you want, and don't go to the CEO. And I think to build, and come back to the topic, to build a modern finance team or get that mindset, it needs to start from top down. And if you have that understanding that finance needs to be on the table, and if there's a new service or product or even changing purchasing policy, so whatever affect the P&L in whatever cash flow in whatever way, if there's a normal process, it doesn't need to be too complicated or bureaucratic, then you don't take away the time of everybody for frozen strawberries.
I love that story. I had a similar, actually had a similar experience in a previous company with avocados. Don't take away the avocados.
It's all about the food, right? Don't go ever on the food with employees. Never ever go on the food.
Yeah,
no, don't do that.
Yeah,
so this is
why.
No, I experienced travel and expenses can be a very, very good topic in a cross-functional topic we did together with Jens Kade, Julia. This is how we, for example, as an example, how can you place, it is a question from Valerie, how can you now, if you upskilled your finance team overall, how can you now change the mindset of leaders within the business to make them seen as business partner? For example, a very political topic, it's travel and expenses, because it involves every employee normally, most of them. This is why sometimes it helps to start with a thing that saves and time for everyone. Make it very digital, techie apps, show them how cool finance is, really branding finance as modern, as techies, as valuable, as being, please ask me, also for contracts, for legal. Of course, we like to help. Of course, we are a supportive function. We are there to help you grow. This is basically the job also of finance. And as you all know, if finance works, nobody says, hey, thank you. But if finance doesn't work, everybody is complaining. So I think it's very important. It has a very deep impact also in business on people, also on the food, right? As you see, also on really time saving, on time savings, also on trust building, of course, to investor relation and to banks. I think it's very important to be reliable. No finance profile. I think every finance profile has reliability. You need to stand to your words. If you said your word, we say if it's promised, you need to also deliver against it. So be very wise what you promise, also in reporting, in changes or anything. Be very wise to choose it. Make a buffer to it so you actually can deliver and perform against it, and make your trust building success roadmap upwards so you can show it's actually possible to really be modern in finance and to give business value. That's, I think, most important.
Agreed. I think now we elaborated, let's say, how we get the whole mindset shifted from top down, what modern finance is, and enabling finance to be in decision-making power, and we kind of approach the topic from that side. So now let's say we have built all that, let's say, support and enforcement that finance needs to perform well as a modern finance team. Now you have two options, right? You either need to hire a modern finance team or get your team that you already have maybe more towards the direction of further growing and supporting this, let's say, well, modernness. So maybe we Luciana or Julie, you want to talk about, let's say you need to hire fresh candidates, what to look for in terms of, or define to add to the business a modern team member.
I think recruitment is huge, and I've learned a lot over the years on how to recruit and how to change the culture. But just going back a little bit, I agree with everything that Theresa said. I think it's so important for you to be seen as trustworthy. But more than that, I would go a little bit further and say that you need to earn that trust by helping them. You need to help the business do what it wants to do. You cannot be the naysayer. You cannot be the obstacle. You have to be the enabler. You have to be the one. If someone wants to do something that is completely outrageous, instead of saying no, why don't you just understand what they're trying to achieve and propose alternatives on how they can achieve that? If you do that, you will change the perception of the business. The business will not see you as a back office, as an obstacle. The business will see you as a partner, as someone who's there to help them get there faster. Just going back to your point, Julia, about hiring new people. Yes, you can hire new people, but at the end of the day, it's the leadership that sets the tone. So whoever you hire will follow you. And when I say follow you, it's not what you say, it's what you do, it's the way you behave, is how you present yourself, is how you interact with the business on a day-to-day basis. If you set the tone that, okay, this person has a problem, you need to help him instead of just saying he can't do this, then you will eventually change the culture within your team as well. And if you see an attitude that is not coherent with that message, then you call it out, you fix it, you address it, and then slowly and surely things will change.
So your point is that a modern high performing finance team starts from the finance leader on top, and then everything else will fall in line.
No doubt.
I would say, it's one of the questions that we're getting is like, what are the first profiles, the first people that you would hire? And completely agree. I think maybe, especially at a startup, you can't really afford, like a super experienced CFO at the beginning, and that's fine. But getting someone who's senior enough, who can actually debate with the CEO, debate with the other people in the company, make those decisions and establish that role of finance first off is really important. And then also that kind of breadth of experience, that just going back to a little bit of the operational and the risk side, you have kind of just enough experience to understand what is a critical risk for the company versus what can kind of be pushed down the prioritization list, right? Like it's all about making kind of assessed risk assessments. So I think the first couple of roles, number one, agree, that senior finance person who can set the tone and figure out the risk side of things. And then probably from there, depending on the nature of the company, a finance manager or kind of a semi-experienced kind of finance operations person who, again, can look after the operational side, tackle the accounting, and maybe take away some of the day-to-day work. But acknowledging some of that day-to-day work will require judgment as well, which is why I kind of lean towards hiring an experienced person to do that rather than a fresh grad, which I know can be quite popular in startups as well.
Yeah. Julie, a thought to add to that, right? Experience is a wide word here. How about just reframing it a little? An early stage startup needs a different personality and different experience than mid-stage hypergrowth or IPO readiness, stuff like that. It doesn't mean that the CFO who starts very early on is not able to do so, but I would say, and also the team, right? But you need to understand that you are going to need to develop and learn and also get maybe external coaching, because handling a team just yourself in the beginning, and maybe the CFO range later on in a team of 10 or 20 is a totally different skill set you may need. You may need to let go a little more of some things, right? You also relearn some new parts. So I think also this is with any C-level and any leadership, also it's a road we choose. And I think this upskilling, also getting external coaching and stuff like this together, also in leadership teams and teams I had experience within one client, we did it within a team of 20, amazing. We learned how to give constructive feedback together. So keep on doing, less doing, and also do more. Yeah, so things like that. How do I address wishes? How do I handle this? And how am I going for it? How can I also make them being really reliable to what they decided on? Because behavioral change is a long road trip. We all know culture, and I think this is, and I formulated this sentence very much. I think the how I see it, basically, the culture and the environment is created always together, and I see it that each individual in the team member, C-level, whoever where you are, has the ability, the ownership, and the responsibility to create together this, I would say, culture.
It's very true. I think we've talked a lot about the different stages of like how it might evolve. I guess one of the questions that comes up a lot is like, well, how do you hire these people? Where do you find them? What are your hiring strategies? I think, Julia, do you want to share how you do this?
I think there's a big difference, and this is very much personal preference. So everybody has to figure out how they want to hire their team. But I think for whichever companies I've worked for in the last or built up the teams, I think two things that were very important to me is I call it a love for accounting. So people who do not hesitate to go deep into numbers if they need to. They don't have to as a controller, you should, or as a business analyst or as an accountant, depends on the role you're choosing. But even if you're not an accountant in my team, if you're joining, you still should not shy away of going really deep into the numbers. And I always ask, if I put you in accounting, would you book 1 or 2 weeks, book entries? And if somebody really says, no, I never want to, it's like something that kind of puts me off. I mean, my team never let me do book entries. Don't know why, but I don't understand. But this is something
maybe
that
they're
I really
afraid you'll sneak those strawberries in.
Yes, exactly. Like, what happens if I delete here? I always ask before I do something, can I break anything? No, but so that, and the second one is, given that the nature of the business I work for centralized finance functions for the portfolio companies, and now also having a team where finance is also very front office, and we have a product like business travel, where finance is in the product. So we also are facing the customers when they have questions about their reports or invoices. So it's very customer oriented, which is the last, after trustworthiness and business part and all that, the customer focus, that finance should also think about the service or product that comes out of this company. How is it perceived or on a finance perspective for the customer? And how can finance make the product or service better? I think that's the last of the 3 evolvement periods of finance. How can you, with finance, really influence the product and service of your company? Which we could. So the second part of the profile I look for is, are you a person that is willing to help? Are you actually interested in helping your finance colleagues, your boss, your other departments, and are you willing to do that? And then you can be a business partner as well, and you can go deep into topics and solve them.
Mm-hmm.
It's a wonderful question, actually. I just have to pull it to the front because, correct, Julia, you just mentioned you need to want to help and having a little understanding. And now, how important is it for you that the member of your finance team have previously worked in management consulting, Big Four, investment banking, or what backgrounds are you looking for? So, Fabian, this is an amazing question. I would say it's a very good question, and I would actually like to go, Julia and Luciana. You're more in the position, right, where you make those decisions, and maybe basically base a little on the why. Why do you do so?
Okay, it's not that important, to be honest. One thing I've learned is that technical skills are important, but they are pretty much the equalizer. If you need an accountant, you can find especially in London, you can find millions of accountants with the same qualification. They are ACCA or Seaman, etc. That is not what's going to make the candidate successful. I think you have to go a little bit deeper. So yes, first background, yes, you've done accounting before, you have experience in this, you have experience in tax, great. But then what makes a person really successful in a certain role, for me in specific, is also how that person thinks, how that person makes decision, how that person deals with others. For example, one tool I use that helps me a lot is the MBTI test, personality test. Because, for example, if I'm hiring an accountant, that person needs to be almost an introvert a little bit. It needs to be detail-oriented. It needs to be data-driven. It needs to be someone, I can't have someone that is an intuitive doing accounting, right? I need to have someone analytical, technical, detail-oriented doing accounting. If I'm hiring FP&A, for example, then it's a different profile, it's a different personality. That person is probably going to be a bit more outgoing, a bit more curious, a bit more not so, yes, a little bit detail-oriented, yes, a little bit analytical, but perhaps a little bit more intuitive in a sense that they can understand where the business is heading, what the business wants, and then translate that into numbers. So yes, the technical, how important is the background? Not hugely important. A lot of people have the same experience. You can find anywhere. It's about the right profile from a personality, from a decision-making, thinking process point of view that determines the success or not, in my experience.
Completely agree. And just in terms of the hiring strategy to test for that, because obviously in interviews, candidates can always answer questions theoretically, super easy to say whatever you think should be said, right? So what I found really useful over the last few years actually is always having a practical element to it. And you often see, quite often we might do like a little bit of an assignment. We put a time cap on it, right? Because you don't want to impose too much time on the person's personal life, but actually bring that assignment back and do a bit of a workshop. Especially in an FP&A role. Actually, a lot of the roles we do, even on the financial controller role, for example, we would also bring an engineer into the workshop interview, see how the person communicates with other members of the company, not just finance to finance. How do they communicate? Can they speak outside of debits and credits? And that workshop really helps to explore in a live situation. You throw kind of curveballs at them, see how they think, see how they interpret, how they deal under pressure as well, with lots of different things happening. So just being able to translate. In an interview, you can say lots of different things. How do you actually test for it? I've just found that doing the practical assignments and a workshop element has been super useful, including other people from the company to help make that assessment as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think most of my roles that I recruit for also have this practical part attached to it. But I think going back to everything you said and what skill sets are general or should be attached to a role, I think I first decide what is the pain that I have that this role should solve, right? I don't necessarily go from a cliche role of an accountant or controller, but what's actually the pain that's behind why I'm recruiting this person, and then what skill set needs to be attached to that, solving for that pain. So before, a controller can be in every organization something different, right? And if I need a controller who actually needs to, let's say, clean up my data, where it's actually important that the second decimal is actually checked, which later in stages is more like an 80-20 rule that's more important. So the controller doesn't spend too much time to figuring out why the decimal is wrong. And if I need the decimal hunter, I'll ask them, how do you organize yourself on a day-to-day matter, right? And my favorite controller that I hired said that, he writes a list with a pencil and what he has to do. And if he's done, he crosses it out with a, oh gosh, now the word is missing, lineal, with a
The ruler?
With the ruler. So he crosses it out with a ruler. And I'm like, yeah, you are my decimal hunter.
That is a good controller. That is a good accountant, a good controller. I love that. The good accountants are usually the ones that are very methodic. They're very Cartesian in the way they think, in the way they operate. Those are the good accountants. I completely agree. I would hire him on the spot.
Exactly. I totally. So this is, I think, the things I look for, and then the practical examples. I usually have business case like P&L, like the calculations, or introducing a cost center structure and make a presentation, or how do you think about that, and all that, and then they have to send that back. Or even a working student for me has to identify some invoice VAT markers, and then that's it.
Yeah, just to add a little perspective here, because why you said it's not important to have background Big Four or investment banking. I would say if you look Big Four or management consulting, also McKinsey's, etc., right? They're standing for something. It's their brand, and of course, I think all of them, most of them are environments for learning. So of course we get e-learnings, etc., right? So it's pushed also to us, and we need to be in front also, right? We are consultants, we're learning. Also auditors, of course, they have a mindset, being very critical, of course, understanding, being picky, and making amazing questions. So I think yes, it's the question nailing it too much on management consulting Big Four. I think if you see the background of the person, you may see a bit about the environment, and maybe also ask the question, if you hire, why the person wants to move or why the person wants to change. Because normally we're not talking, if you're hiring, you're not want to talk about too much of the past, but it's the experience you're maybe hiring. And then, but where does the person want to go? And correct. So I think this is much more important. And then the personality, of course, Luciana, this is what you need. So I think creating a win-win out of this for both sides, for you, for the company, for the person, and making a great team. I think this is always very important to see it. There are many stakes on the table always, and I think creating this in a good field, so everyone feels heard, understood, as said, trusted, and then working towards this wonderful goal, as Luciana said in the beginning, right? You need the target where do you want to go. I think this is a great thing to align.
Just to add. Sorry, Julie.
Sorry, no, I think we're at time. So just do you want to just say really quickly?
No, just two questions I like to ask on interviews is what frustrates you, what makes you feel frustrated. That tells you a lot. And what part of your job do you love the most, and the part of your job that you hate the most. It tells you a lot as well. Just a heads up.
Yes, for sure. I think there's actually a lot of really good questions in the Q&A that we haven't got to. I recognize that, but we are at time, unfortunately. So I wanted to thank all of our speakers and all the 100+ attendees that came today. It's a great audience. We do have a networking session after this. I think once you exit the webinar, you'll have a couple of options of where to go, like other webinars or the networking roundtable. So please definitely come join there, and we can continue some of these discussions. But ultimately, to wrap up, it sounds like working towards this modern finance team, there's been a lot of conversation about the soft skills development, like being clear about establishing who finance is in your organization versus what it should be, and working with champions, whoever it is at the C-level, working with champions in the organization to make that happen, and just highly encouraging everybody to make that really explicit, and then to hire for those skill sets as well as you need to, depending on the company growth. But yeah, it's been a great discussion, and look forward to continuing it at the roundtables.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Julia.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.